Oh, hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. So, we're taking a final look at the Book of the Dead, as it is now officially released, and you can buy it. Isn't that good news? So, what makes this book unique, and why do I really like it? They haven't become formulaic. Um, there's always a trend to make publishing easy and to just go, this is the format we're using for all of the books we release. There's going to be a bit of this, a bit of this, a bit of this, and it's done. And they rinse and repeat. But so far, all of the books that we've had released for Pathfinder 2 have had different elements and different amounts of certain things to make each book different. What this book does, and the first and obvious thing it does differently, is the fact that it includes a mini campaign, which is fab. Third, fourth level, that kind of point. It's a classic kind of undead like horror story. It has some great mechanics and ideas in it for surviving in an area that's literally infested with undead. So when you spend the night, you have to like fortify where you're staying. And there are there's almost a mini game in the way that that works with kind of building barricades and what that means for what kind of challenges you face during the night. A brilliant idea. It has a quite substantial bestiary within its bounds. And what's quite cool about the bestiary is that it has lots of new and unique undead, but it also doesn't hide away from touching on existing types of undead and expanding them. So we have a whole new series of ghosts, so we can just pick up and run ghosts at different levels with different themes. Vampires get the same treatment. Mummies get the same treatment. There are more rules for grave knights, which are a favourite of mine. They're a classic undead villain, to touch on but a few. So they've really kind of not shied away from the fact that, yeah, we've got zombies and there's already a reasonable selection of zombies, but why not add a few more? And there's enough unique stuff in here. And interestingly, stuff that again has a nice broad range of challenge ratings. So it's not all epic level monsters. I mean, there are some great thematic kind of challenge rating 20 monsters in the book, as long as you are kind of aware of what you want. You can find something in here pretty quickly. Again, looking at how they've kind of touched on zombies, they've fleshed them out quite well and added some quite good depth to zombies. But then they've used some of the monsters within the campaign. The campaign is... So I think, to give you an idea of the campaign without too many spoilers, there's definitely some Call of Duty Zombies inspiration in the way that you're fortifying and barricading to survive the night. And I'm pretty sure that people are going to lift those rules and put them into any campaign with undead in it, because that's a really cool idea, and I really, really like it. But they also use some of the monsters, like the Zombie Lord, that's like a more capable, more intelligent zombie that's able to kind of command and steer the zombies around it. They touch on, and this is another nice thing, there's a whole section where they touch on places in Galorian that are very, very heavily linked to the undead. So, Xianmen. Under the rainy perpetual gloom of Xianmen, a small and deeply superstitious human population toils under the dual yokes of the spider-like humans called Jorgumo, and a curious panoply of undead that exist nowhere else in the world. I find the concise but common appellation, "Cursed Land of Ghosts and Spiders," sells the region short. And then it details the kind of the things that make that particular area of Galorian unique. The path to Valenhall, which is one based around obviously that kind of Viking kind of culture, that we see in the Land of the Linon Kings. We've got to touchstone on some other, obviously Assyria, classic, Nemret Noctora, which from memory, because I haven't read this one, but I think from memory it's a ghoul city in the Underdark, which is again super cool. So having that useful kind of fluff to build in lore for campaigns is always useful. And they've been smart. They've not made it 14 pages of fluff on one location. They've used evocative language. They have given you concise, useful tidbits of information that give you enough insight to tell your own stories without you having to read a whole book about it. Enough to give you flavour, which is super cool. Zombie mammoth, anyone? What I was saying about zombies. There's a good example of something you can do with a zombie. Zombie owlbear, anyone? So you can see that they've kind of taken, I mean, even wights, which are again a classic undead, get some love with some variation on their challenge ratings and abilities and the things that they can do. One of the slightly surrealist ones is you've got what they call Wildgeist, and they're undead created from nature that are kind of avengeful spirits of like trees and plants and animals. That when there's like some form of desolation to the natural world, perhaps through excessive industrialization or maybe a war effort that just chops down whole forests to build catapults and ships and all that kind of other stuff that's made of timber, nature can retaliate. And a Waldgeist, it may be Waldgeist, Waldgeist. Have a guess. Wildgeist is creature 8. So it's just powerful enough for kind of that kind of early doors play as a final boss, but it's also a good kind of mid-level monster. They touch on some of the classes. So there's like a bone croupier who is a gambler who was so addicted to gambling that urge to gamble kept them alive after they died. And they have all sorts of cool abilities where they can force you to kind of roll dice to take the gamble that can lead to healing or quite a lot of negative damage, depending on how lucky/unlucky you are at rolling 2d6, which is a mini game. You as the player have to roll those dice and tell the GM the number you got, and then you get a little quick table to kind of go, this happens. Which again is a super fun, unique trait for a monster to have. They look at lots of different aspects of how you can take monsters and bring them into a game. And I think the way that this book has so wonderfully got exactly what it needed to do right is brilliant. There's a nice selection of player options to fight undead, but there's not millions, because there's already some quite good options and there's already some classics. I mean, it's quite hard to not, when you think about fighting undead, go straight to a cleric. That's almost their bread and butter anyway. So the fact that they haven't kind of gone, oh, well, we need to do, loads and loads of stuff for players to fight undead with, when they clearly had a much bigger picture in mind, is brilliant and quite bold, because D&D has never done it. It doesn't matter what edition you look at, D&D has never looked at undead as something that you can expand players into as a space. So to kind of be bold enough to kind of go, okay, so yeah, here's some stuff to fight undead with, but also here's some stuff to play undead with. Here's a load more, monsters to use that are really well flavoured and tailored across a broad spectrum of challenge ratings. that have unique abilities and are fun and interesting, and obviously many quite gruesome and terrifying. Gives you ample opportunity to kind of find something new to throw at a party in a particularly unpleasant land. Combining that with the fact that there is a campaign, very short, a couple of sessions is probably what you're looking at, um, but that has some unique new rules in it for this whole idea of how well you defend an area and how well you create defenses in an area reflects on how challenging and what challenges you face and how high the threats you face are is super fun and would be quite easy to adapt based on its framework to other settings. It doesn't just have to be battening up the doors of the tavern and piling tables up in front of the doors, and then hiding upstairs with the stairs kind of blocked off as best you can, in the hope that the zombies won't smash their way in, smash their way up the stairs, and tear you limb from limb. You can do that with you know violent gangs in a city. You could do it with invading orcs in Belkson. You've got lots of options to kind of look at that and think, all right, I've got a situation where I want to have this happen. This framework will fit on it. And I can just change the undead, but take the guidance on challenge ratings and threat and just change the monsters. Bob's your uncle. So that's super fun and a really kind of cool thing to kind of jump into as a design team. The design team behind this are absolutely hats off. Really, really good. It's a huge range. What I love is there's all sorts of bits of fluff and lore around the monsters. I always choose the ones with the names that I can't pronounce. I don't know what that is. It's kind of some kind of self-destructive urge. Onryu, I'm going to call this. Onryo. Onryu. Onryus are created when a person dies violently in the grip of extreme emotion, such as unbridled rage or overwhelming sorrow. These twisted undead return as beings of pure vengeance, seeking to endlessly spread suffering. They're a creature who is level 12, and again, the artwork's awesome. One of the monsters that I quite like is Gallowdead, and they're like they're undead created by Tar-Bathon, the obviously the twisted tyrant, and he created them at his fortress Gallowspire. So they're like super mega powerful undead kind of. They're like you. It was that situation where you could easily mistake them for more mundane undead in the way that they look like kind of wights or maybe even kind of skeletal kind of warriors, but they're just absolutely pumped up on like evil necromantic power. So they're pretty powerful foes. So again, that kind of whole thing of almost the trickery of undeath you can kind of bring to play. Mortics are quite unpleasant, and there's 3 different kinds of mortics, and they're not quite undead. They're like they're almost alive, almost dead. They're on the verge of death, but somehow necromantic energy just stops them from teetering over and becoming fully dead. And they like Shardens, which is the kind of the simple lowest form of Mortic, which is in this case it's called a Sharden Immolator, and it's a goblin that loves setting fires. It also loves setting fire to itself, and using that to like burn and hurt other beings. It's quite twisted, but it's a goblin, so goes with the territory. Looking through the bestiary, there are I mean, a whole swathe of new liches, um, which is awesome because liches are such a classic, like, undead villain end of campaign boss, and being able to kind of re-flavor and just mix them up a little bit because they are quite common. I think they probably crop up as a big bad in a lot of people's campaigns when it comes to dealing with undead, because they are one of the classics. I mean, there's something straight out of Lord of the Rings, Last Guard, which is literally an army of ghosts. It's challenge rating 20. It's level 20 creature, but it's a mob. I think what do they actually use? They have an actual term because they're basically swarms, but then they use a different term. Troops. They're a troop. But yeah, they're literally an army of ghosts, aka Lord of the Rings, the dead. Well, the living shall not pass. And you've got that whole thing where you can build a campaign up to almost have that moment where your party has to convince the army of ghosts to come and help you defeat the big bad's army. Bob's your uncle. You can now relive your favourite Lord of the Rings undead moment. Having this much content that offers GMs and players, and even almost the ability to buy this book and use the online rules and run an undead campaign out of the gate, is really fun. And all power to Paizo that they keep mixing things up. It would be lovely if they gave us a campaign with every book. Even if it's only like this, a few sessions long. But that's quite a big ask. When you think about how the development of this book has gone, they have had to look at existing monsters, like zombies and skeletons and ghouls and ghosts and vampires, and ones that they've really focused in on for player options. And then they've done that again, but looking at them as NPC/villains and gone, all right, how do we expand zombies? How do we expand ghouls? How do we expand vampires? And then they've gone, all right, now let's add different new types of undead. Let's touch other zombies, other undead types that we've already kind of worked on. Liches. Let's look at Lich, see how we can develop, expand that. That's a really difficult thing to do because you're having to pick your way around existing law, existing rules. So you're almost having to kind of double up on your balance to make sure that you're not just ending up with something that's the same or only a little bit different and kind of pointless. So, there's a lot of work that's gone in here. Combining that with then going, all right, on top of all that, we're going to put in player options to fight undead, and we're going to have to make sure that they balance against all this new kind of metric of stuff we've allowed. This was probably a pretty serious undertaking when it came to planning, development, and the process that the really talented authors that worked on this book went through to get to this point where it's now available to buy. So, the lore and the fluff and the way that constantly there are these little passages that are kind of built as flavor text and just almost telling you this story through the book from Geb's perspective, who obviously is the super arch mega necromancer of Geb, the undead nation, is super cool. I've just got to Ghoul. So they've thrown in Priest of Kibiria, a creature 5, essentially like a ghoul cleric. Is probably this is the laziest way to describe that as a monster, of their particular kind of deity and their kind of religion that they have. Ghost pirate captain. Just such a simple, iconic, classic idea. And that's your creature 8 ghost. to throw in, because who doesn't love a ghost pirate captain guarding a treasure chest in a cave, waiting for the party to come and try and steal his treasure? Just chef's kiss. So going through, a Gasha Dokuru, a challenge rating or creature level 13, huge undead skeletal abomination of terrifying death. I mean, it's a creature level 13, so it's pretty totem, and it's huge, and the artwork is just horrifying. So love it. So if you're looking, here you go, Gallo Dead, creature level 15, but if you look at the artwork, you could really easily kind of think that they were just maybe, what's the skeletal champion, in the way that they've kind of got the glowing eyes and some armour, and they clearly have intelligence and malevolence kind of powering them as well as unlife. And then all of a sudden, it's a Gallo Dead and it's creature level 15, and it's terrifyingly ass-whooping. So the book is a really useful tool for anyone who loves undead and or the classic kind of horror vibes that you get with that. And with the way that they've embellished unique areas of Galorian with some additional fluff and lore to help you kind of routing a campaign that you can jump into, is brilliant. This will give you an absolute toolbox of undead, macabre and madness to either unleash on your players or have your players unleash on a kind of gaming world. It will give you the ability to surprise parties that have faced traditional undead multiple times, because if you're a long-term gamer like myself, and people that are much longer in the tooth than me when it comes to gaming, you've probably killed 3 or 4 liches, maybe 5 or 6 as big bads. And so to have the ability to really mix those kind of classic villains up is again just adding more depth, variety and longevity to games and campaigns. I mean, it's brilliant, isn't it? So it's well worth picking a copy up. One of the things that I think is probably most commendable is the fact that there is that spectrum of, I'm a player, I want to kill undead. I'm a player and I want to be undead. I'm a GM and I like using undead. Why don't we do an undead campaign? Hey, I'd like to know more about undead. Are there any cool places where undead live? Literally, it just any question you can think of, this book can give you an answer. It's clever in the way that it will reference other books, so it'll be like, you can find more of these in Bestiary 3 on page such and such, if they're touching on pre-existing monsters that have a place in another book. So they'll even give you the pointers straight to other books like Bestiary 1 or Bestiary 2 or Bestiary 3, where you can find maybe the base form of that particular monster, or just simply another type of that monster to kind of build and kind of move forward through. And having that kind of unique approach where they've not become formulaic, again, is just genius, because I was happy with the concept that we were probably going to get 2 new classes, some new archetypes, some new fluff and lore, new items, and Bob's your uncle. Do you know what I mean? Because a couple of the books have been, broadly speaking, like that, but only a couple of them. So the fact that this one, they've just been like, oh, here's loads of player options, literally loads of player options for playing or being or fighting undead, and then being like, oh, and here's loads of monsters that you can put into your games that are unique or that are touching on existing monsters and just making them, a bit more dynamic and a bit more varied. And then it's like, oh yeah, here's a little mini campaign as well, All those things are just genius. So are there specific dedicated classes in this book? No. Is that a bad thing? No. There's some great solid archetypes for fighting undead, and we've already got really great solid classes at fighting undead, a la cleric and champion, just to name the two lazy, easy options. You get a champion, and then you give him the kind of the undead hunter archetype, and he's going to be a tour de force against undead until he meets a grave knight who you've upgraded using this book, and then it's going to be a real game of the first to die loses, which is often how things are settled, I find. So if you want something that's going to give you a lot of stuff about that kind of content, then this is an absolute goldmine. I cannot say that enough. It is a goldmine for that. I mean, I've picked my way through it several times now, and I'm still being surprised by bits of kind of side fluff that I've not read. I'm still being kind of shocked and appalled at how grisly some of the monsters are, because that's part of the fun. They, undead and their kind of aspiring kind of campaigns and their servants and their places, they are supposed to chill you. They are supposed to make you shudder. So having just a boatload to throw into your arsenal as a games master or a player, well, chef's kiss. So, I forgot to say, a whole load of new traps and hazards that are themed around undead. Sadistic Conductor, Flood of Spirits. Flood of Spirits, A, sounds terrifying, and B, is a level 18 hazard. AKA, it's going to absolutely kick the living pap out of you. Literally, a wave of spirits fly through the area, passing right through the living. Cold negative, surge through is its reaction. A creature passes through the area. Effect, the haunt deals 3d12 plus 20 negative damage and 3d12 plus 20 cold damage to creatures in the area. DC 40, basic reflex save. Well, and you could be so, horrifying with that kind of sudden wall of clawing, leering, screaming, agonised kind of ghost just suddenly erupting and just pouring down a corridor, just smashing through you and being like, make me a save. And you being like, 37. And you being like, loads of damage. And then being like, ah! And that's why this book is quite good. Because that happens. So, like I said, just endless stuff and things, ghoulish and garish. Ghost stories, looking at ways that you can create a ghost story in your campaign so that you can build and structure that kind of a classic tale of things that go bump in the night that gives people the shivers. So guidance on that kind of a thing, which again is brilliant, because in terms of not an adventure path but an arc across 2-3 sessions, that's a brilliant tool to just build in tension and fear. So yeah, it's a very, very good book. It offers you loads of choices, loads of options. It creates some really good evocative opportunities to have stories go in whole new directions. I mentioned in the previous video that, at level 2, Steve the fighter died to ghouls, and you fled the crypts, and 9 times out of 10, Steve's gone, and that's the end of Steve. Suddenly, Steve the ghoul comes out of the crypts and he's just like, all right, lads, I'm Steve the Ghoul now, or I'll be the ghoul fighter who will be travelling with you on the rest of the adventure. And the rest of the party are just like, what? And you have to then see how that affects the world, see how it affects the story, how NPCs react. It just suddenly goes in a new direction. Genius. So Is the book essential? That's a question I always ask. And my leaning is more towards probably very than it's optional. And the reason I say that is because, and this is personal, undead are a classic evocative like plot device in so many games and so many stories and so many kind of campaign arcs that it would be silly to not have it, because it's going to give you great opportunity to be able to amp things up, because this is really important. The options that players get to fight undead help you as a GM kind of bully up the kind of things that you can throw at them, because certain undead are reliant on certain things that give them strong advantages, and if you start taking those away, they become weaker than anticipated. But it means that you can bully stuff up. It means that you can be braver in how kind of literally a horde of zombies from a town can just claw at a building, and huge zombie brutes can smash their way through walls, and vampire lords can come swooping in, and you can just build and build. So if you've any inclination to be running some kind of campaign in any part of Glorian where it is touched by the thing that goes bump in the night, Ustalav being a really simple evocative where I set a recent kind of one shot, then it's a no-brainer. If you have a couple of players at your table who love fighting undead and often try and build archetypes into doing that, it's really useful. If you've got established players that know what they're doing and have been around the block a few times, it helps you mix it up as a GM. If you want to run a horror campaign with some unique kind of new rule sets for the classic kind of zombie movie / Call of Duty zombies kind of vibe, Bob's your uncle. Do you see what I mean? It's hard to say no. So enjoy it if you pick it up. Let me know your thoughts down below. Next up, I'm going to be touchstoning on the Knights of Lastwar book, which again is different again to this book, to touch on that thing of not being formulaic. Obviously, the first and most prominent feature of that book is the fact that they have adopted a trans character as the main kind of art piece for the front of that book, which I think is very bold and very brave and very now. So looking at it from how Paizo are kind of pushing out there and how they're driving forward, that book again, unique, different to this, and I'm touchstoning it next. So if you're interested in knightly orders, if you're interested in how you can build them into your own games, how you can adopt, adapt, and build your own knightly orders from pre-existing content, if you have an interest in the Whispering Way and the stories around Tor Bathon, the fall of Lastwall, the desolation of the Order, if that part of Glorian history floats your boat, it's a good book. If you just enjoy playing knightly characters, it's a good book. If you're a world lore junkie, it's a great book. So I will catch you on the flip side, and we'll see you next week. Peace.